Now is the time when we go into our meditation together this morning. So I invite you to all now to just gently close your eyes or just find a spot to soften your gaze. And just allow your body to just begin to relax. Anything that may be causing you stress or that is blocking your good this morning, I just invite you to just let it go, even if only for a moment. Just to relax and just to breathe naturally. And our daily word today was world peace. So we're going to start to bring this peace into our lives. And we're going to start by allowing it to begin with us. So I ask you to be willing and be open today during our meditation. And the first thing I want to ask you to do is to think about a person. Bring a person to your mind. A person that perhaps you had a disagreement with recently. Maybe someone you had a disagreement with years ago. Maybe someone who you don't agree with, whether it's politically or religion or spirituality. But bring this person to mind. See this person sitting in front of you and feel their presence in the room with you. And now I invite you to look into their eyes, to just stare into each other's eyes for a moment, seeing beyond all of those things we see as physical, looking beyond into the soul and into the spirit of this person. Just allow yourselves to gaze into each other's eyes for just a moment. Just letting those things on the surface just go and just seeing and feeling the oneness and the interconnectedness between each other. Seeing the God that is within that person. Now I ask you to grab their hands and just hold their hands in your own. Feeling the warm touch of their skin and the life that exists in those hands. And just hold their hands. Allow their hands to just sit in yours as you continue to stare into their soul and into the spirit and into the God that's within that person. Now I ask you to take it a step further. I ask you to walk up to that person and to give them a hug and to hold them in an embrace. Not just seeing the God within, but feeling the God within that person. And as we prepare to go into our moment of silence, I invite you to just stand and just hold each other in the embrace. And when you do, I invite you to say to that person, You are a child of God, and I love you. You are a child of God, and I love you. As we go into our moment of silence. And I now invite you to bring your focus back into this room. And to just know that despite all of our perceived differences, we really are all one in spirit. And anytime we meet someone or encounter someone in our daily lives, whether it's a friend or a family or maybe someone we don't even know that we disagree with, that we can always remember that each one of us has that God within. And we can always just take a moment to just pause and to acknowledge the God within, whether we agree or not. Because we really are all one and we really are all interconnected. And let's just breathe in this moment of this interconnectedness. And to know that world peace and peace really does always start within. For I am peace. And so it is. And so we allow it to be. Namaste. Unity Jazz Band. We've got Pete on the drums, Steve on the piano, Sherry is our singer, and Tim on the sax. So thank you. All right. And I'm Reverend Evin Wilkins. I think I've met everybody in here, but for those of you who are online that I may not have met, welcome. And I want to give a special welcome to, we may have a visitor online this morning, all the way from Washington State. Wendy, I want to give you a special welcome if you're out there watching today. So anyway, what's 2 weeks from today? Yes. And it falls on a Sunday, so you know what that means. Costumes. And I'm going to just tell you now, there's going to be treats, but there may also be tricks. So you'll have to show up to find out. And if you're going to watch online that day, you better still wear a costume, because we're going to find a way to see you. So anyway, let's say this. If you are planning on watching from home that day, but you want to wear a costume, send in a picture of yourself in costume and we'll show it here on Sunday so you can also participate. And then we'll have everybody that's wearing a costume come up so the people at home can see you. So make sure it's a good costume. Anyway, so I'll get off that little Halloween tangent. But anyway, so it's week 4 of our book study, and we're going 7 weeks in this. If you've got one of the study guides, we're going along with the study guide. And if you don't have one, there's some on the table right outside. You can pick one up and follow along with us in that. But we'll be going through that 3 more weeks after today. So anyway, we're studying the Book of Joy, and it's by the Dalai Lama, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and author Douglas Abrams. So I want to start this Sunday off with a question. And you don't have to be honest, but you can raise your hand if you want to be. But who in here has ever felt anger before? I see a hand that did not come up. Anyway. Probably the better question is, who hasn't felt anger before? All right, that's more like it. So the book reading this week, it covers a lot of ground, and I obviously can't cover everything during a Sunday talk. So I wanted to find something that I thought we could really focus on this morning, and I wanted to focus more on the anger aspect of things, because this is something that we can all relate to, right? And I think it's also a good topic to discuss because I think many people are feeling it right now for various reasons. I mean, who hasn't felt it recently over something or other? And I have to admit that I was pretty impressed with the reading this week, especially the chapter on anger, because Archbishop Tutu, the author tells us that Archbishop Tutu, he's driving along on the road and he has a car cut in front of him. And the author's like, okay, this is the Archbishop. I want to see how he reacts to this, because he had to swerve to keep from missing the car. So the author of the book says, I want to see how he's going to react to this. And of course, my first reaction, if that had been me, I would have been blaring the horn and probably yelling things that I can't say in church. I'll just say, I would say, what the heck are you doing? Stay off the road. Mindy knows how I am, I haven't been that much anymore lately, but yeah. We don't live in Dallas, Texas anymore either, because that was bad there. So anyway, you get out of Dallas, it's a little calmer. But anyway. But no, the Archbishop, he does what we would expect him to do. He just, he wonders if the driver has had an emergency that's making them drive erratically. So the Archbishop was true to his teachings. But who in here would have really probably had that reaction? Oh, I think that person must be having an emergency. No. But by the laughs, I'm going to say it's good to know that I'm not alone in the reaction that I might have had. But we've all experienced anger. I mean, there are just some things that no matter how hard we try are going to make us feel feelings of anger, right? No matter what we do. And sometimes that anger even feels justified, doesn't it? Think of traffic or waiting in line somewhere. Sometimes that can give us a little bit of that, it's taking forever. But remember, last week I mentioned a television show called The Big Bang Theory. And there's these 4 guys, if you haven't ever seen it, there's these 4 guys and they're best friends, and they're all been labeled as geeks. Now, they're all these brilliant guys, they're physicists, and I think one of them is a mechanical engineer. And they all work at, they conduct research and things like that at this major university. And anyhow, in one episode, the latest Star Trek movie has come out. And they've all been waiting in line because they want to buy tickets to be there for the opening show. And they've been camped out in this line for hours when suddenly someone allows their best friend to cut in line right in front of them. And one of the guys, Sheldon, he's feeling a little angry about this. Now, the other guys say, Sheldon, you need to just let it go. Now, Sheldon's not one of those guys that's a tough guy or anything. He just sees something that he thinks is a wrong and he wants to right it. So he doesn't let it go. And what ends up happening is that they're all asked to leave the theater. So the anger wasn't very conducive in this instance. Because in the end, they all ultimately suffered because they waited in line for nothing and ended up missing opening night of Star Trek. It was Star Wars, actually. I'm a Trekkie. I'm more of a Trekkie, so it was Star Wars. But in our book, the Dalai Lama tells us a story about this old car he used to drive and how he would share it with other people. And he mentioned about how one guy that used to drive it around some would also do the repairs on it. So one day the man is under the hood and he's working on the car, and the Dalai Lama walks by and wants to talk to him. So the guy, he's coming up from the car and he hits his head. He's coming up to look at the Dalai Lama and he hits his head. Well, the pain of hitting his head made him feel a little angry. So he intentionally bangs his head against the fender, and he does this a few times out of anger. He's mad that he hit his head, so he's going to hit his head a few more times intentionally. And do you think that perhaps this man just might have let his anger get away from him? Just a little bit? So to this, the Dalai Lama poses some good food for thought and some questions. He says, that is anger. What use is it? The very reason he lost his temper is that he hit his head, and then he hits his head on purpose, inflicting more pain upon himself. It's foolish. When anger develops, think, what is the cause? And then also think, what will be the result of my anger? My angry face or my shouting? Then you will realize that anger is not helpful. Now I'm going to tell you that sometimes it feels good in the moment to let angry feelings fly, doesn't it? I mean, sometimes it just feels good. It feels liberating. You know, the sweet release of just yelling it out of your system, of punching a pillow, of telling off your neighbor that you don't agree with. I mean, sometimes it just feels good. I mean, we're spiritual, but we can still sometimes find release in that. But when we do this, our book mentions that we lose the benefit of our critical thinking cortex. So in other words, all of our ability to reason just goes out the door when we let our anger get away from us. This is when we end up doing silly things such as intentionally hitting our heads again. But it's also when we lose our cool in other instances too. You know, saying words that we may ultimately regret to someone that we love or care about. You know, for some people that anger can also result in them inflicting physical or emotional abuse on another person. And those are the things that we can't take back, right? We can't take those back in the moment. Once it's happened, it's out there. Now, obviously, not all of us inflict abuse or intentionally rebang our heads when we act out on feelings of anger, right? But it doesn't mean that we don't still ultimately regret the way in which we allowed it to get away from us in that moment. So might there be an alternative to doing this? And if so, what might that alternative, acting out or whatever it is, be? But first, with anger, it's important to realize that often fear underlies anger. And lots of times when we're acting out on anger, we're feeling feelings of anger, it's based on an underlying feeling of fear. Now we have something entirely different steering that ship of anger, right? You know, it's not the anger itself now, but what it is that's driving the anger. Fear. And we can look around and we can see lots of that right now, can't we? You know, people angry over politics, over the pandemic, whatever it is. And what is driving it, no matter what side you're on? It's fear. It's plain and simple fear. And what is it doing? It's creating more fear and it's creating more feelings of anger. And although we'd like to be able to take a magic pill to make all of these angst feelings go away, it doesn't always work that way, does it? You know, we often have to find the root because that is how we learn to effectively control the main issue. So we realize that with anger, we realize that the root is often fear. You've got anger on the top level and you've got fear that's the foundation here underneath. You know, that person that cut off the archbishop in traffic. You know, there may have been fear behind the way that person was cutting people off. You know, fear of being late to work or fear of ultimately losing their job. You know, fear of not being able to make it to the hospital before a loved one makes their transition. But this can also happen on a very emotional level. You know, maybe we didn't get something that we really wanted. You know, maybe a certain job, that house we wanted, that perfect partner, that perfect spouse that we had our sights set on. This can result in feelings of anger, but in reality, is it really anger or is it really hurt? Is it really fear? You know, maybe as children we were taught, you got to be a go-getter. You've got to be a go-getter in life. You know, you go after what you want and you get it. At all costs, no matter what it takes, you get it. And then what if we don't get it? We get the underlying message that we obviously don't measure up, that we somehow failed because we were told to be a go-getter. We always had to get what we want, what we went after, what we set our sights on. And that hurts. So underneath it all, we walk around with this fear that to not get what we want means that people don't measure up, or that we don't measure up in the eyes of other people. So now we become aware that fear is an underlying cause. Often, the root of our feelings of anger. And notice I always say feelings of anger, not that we are anger, because we're not angry. That's not what our nature is. We aren't angry, we feel anger. So there is a difference. So the next thing we can do is to do something mentioned in the book. To ask, what is the hurt that has caused our anger? What is the fear that we have? One of those, where in the world did it come from and why? Why might I be carrying around this fear with me? It's kind of like going to the doctor, right? Yeah. You have a cough, and the doc might give you a prescription for that cough. But it's not necessarily the cough itself that's the main problem. It's whatever that is causing that cough that most likely needs the most attention. Hopefully not COVID, but anyway. But we also have to be vulnerable with this because getting to the root of anger and what is causing the fear can be a major thing. When we start opening ourselves up to what is it that's causing this fear? We may open up all kinds of wounds by getting to the root of our fear. We may open a floodgate of emotions by getting to the root of it all. And that can sometimes be a scary feeling, can't it? But doing that is also going to help us to begin to remove yet another obstacle in our path to joy. And it's also important to remember that these aren't things, opening up wounds and making ourselves vulnerable aren't things that we have to do alone. We have people along the way that can help us, whether they're family, friends, or even people such as therapists or coaches. There's nothing wrong with getting that help when you need it. Or even our church community. Look around, you've got people that are willing to walk this journey with you and willing to help you along the way. Always remember that you don't have to walk this part of your journey alone. It doesn't make us any stronger to do that, to walk it alone. Sometimes reaching out for help and letting others know that you need help is one of the most powerful things you will ever do. And none of this is trying to imply that feeling anger is wrong or that it's not justified. There's absolutely nothing wrong with feeling anger. And I want you to remember there's nothing wrong with feeling anger. It's what we do with it that matters the most. It's how we use those feelings of anger. We can use it to help to get to know ourselves better. Also, another way to think about anger is this. Remember that the Archbishop helped to organize peaceful protests. And he helped to organize those against apartheid in his home country. Now, I'm sure that laughter isn't what spurred him on. I'm sure there was probably just a little bit of anger mixed in, wouldn't you say? Our book mentions his struggle for freedom and states he was not afraid of anger and righteous indignation in pursuit of peace, justice, and equality in his homeland. The Archbishop also said this, righteous anger is usually not about oneself. It is about those whom one sees being harmed and whom one wants to help. So what if it's not even that we must ultimately remove anger entirely to remove our obstacles to joy? Maybe it's instead using it, as our book states, as a tool of justice, a scythe of compassion. So I think we can start to understand that it's not really anger in and of itself that necessarily blocks our path to joy. The path is usually blocked when we don't know or understand the root of our anger, or when we use it in harmful ways. When we understand it and we use it in these ways, we are using our rational mind. We aren't, as mentioned earlier, losing our critical thinking and ultimately, intentionally, banging our heads on the car. So the Dalai Lama says that if we can discover our role in creating the situations that upset us, we are able to reduce our feelings of frustration and anger. So remember earlier, getting to the root. Now, he also mentions this in regards to other people and when we're feeling anger towards other people. He says, also, when we are able to recognize that the other person has their own fears and hurts, their own fragile and human perspective, then we have a chance of escaping from the normal reflex of anger. So I also want to add here, sometimes it's also a matter of taking care of ourselves. Because all of us know that it is so easy to become overstimulated nowadays. You know, we've got news in our faces 24/7. We almost can't get away from it even if we want to. You know, you can't even get out and pump gas anymore without a little TV on the gas pump. You have blaring commercials in your face. You know, kids in cars. I notice TVs are in the back seats. You know, and when there's not a TV, there's an electronic device up in their face. You know, I even see toddlers walking around with them now. Toddlers have iPads and smartphones and all kinds of stuff. You know, people can't even seem to keep themselves entertained anymore without some kind of an electronic device blaring in their face. I like technology, but I don't feel like I have to have it blaring in my face 24/7. But I remember going up to my parents sometimes and complaining when I was a kid, and my mom tunes in, so I'm sure she's listening right now. But I remember walking up to my parents sometimes when I was a kid, and I'd whine about it. I'd be like, I'm bored. And my parents wouldn't even look up from what they were doing. They just keep doing whatever they were doing and say, go find something to do. But I kind of miss those days, actually. But it can be really difficult to turn off all of that constant noise and that constant chatter. And when we don't, it drains us emotionally. And then in turn begins to affect us physically as well. You know, we just get tired. We just get flat out exhausted mentally and physically. And the Dalai Lama said, too much tiredness can lead us to feel frustration and anger. In my own case, when I encounter some difficult situation in the morning, my mind is calm and it is much easier. When the same situation happens in the late evening and I'm a little bit tired, then I feel annoyed. So it's good to know that even the Dalai Lama feels annoyed from time to time. I'm sure even Jesus felt annoyed from time to time. We all feel annoyed from time to time. But he goes on to mention our physical condition and how it makes a difference. You know, we can't forget the emotional too, because how we are feeling at any given moment can affect how we are moving and how we are being and how we are showing up in the world. And if we aren't showing up as our best, if we aren't showing up as our authentic Christ nature, we're going to experience obstacles to our joy. And that, to me, that just doesn't sound like much fun, does it? So I want to ask you this. How do you want to show up in the world? Who do you want to be in the world? Do you not only want to experience joy, but to be joy? I know that I do. I know which one I would pick automatically. You know, but part of it lies in accepting feelings of anger as a normal part of our experience while we're here on this earth. You know, part of it lies in finding the root of that anger and perhaps even opening and tending to those wounds that we may have ignored up until now. You know, part of it lies in using those feelings of anger in constructive ways when possible. You know, and part of it lies with just allowing yourself to feel and to be that joy that you are. Namaste.